Hi, my name is Gwendolyn Joy, and this is week 6 discussion on microbiology and mycology. Here are my notes. Whoa. Here are my notes, and let's jump right in. Part A. First, we're going to be starting off with the differences between disaster microbiology versus traditional microbiology. And disaster actually focuses on the relationship between the microorganisms versus the catastrophic event. So whatever catastrophe that happened within that area. And those are actually applied for the preparedness and response and recovery efforts to be able to identify and mitigate the outbreaks and health risk associated within that natural disaster within that area. Whereas traditional microbiology is more of a broader spectrum of studies of how the microorganisms are within taxonomy, physiology, and their genetics, and those are applied within medicine, agriculture, as well as medicine, and environmental sciences, and they're studied so that way we can see their environmental effects within the aspects of microbes. And now we're leading into the second topic of part A, which is we're describing the kind of what can happen within flooding, hurricanes, more, and how those contribute to the infectious diseases within that disaster area. So flooding, it actually leads to waterborne diseases. That's a big thing. And some examples of those waterborne diseases are cholera, hepatitis A, and dysentery. I'm hoping I'm saying these words. They're still big words for me. I'm learning. And for hurricanes, the destruction actually creates ideal breeding grounds for things like mold and just other diseases just to spread and pathogens just to kind of get in. And war, because there's barricades, and so it's hard for, resources such as food to be able to move across that area. So people are being kind of cut off from freshwater sanitation areas as well as medical health care. And now we're going to be going back into that, the war, because of the limited amount of health care, it actually can increase those that have, they all, hurricanes as well as flooding, it also creates a big stomping ground for diseases and different outbreaks for things. And some common bacterial phages are actually just a few in their effects. So two actually big ones that cause diarrhea. One causes more of a serious, severe diarrhea, which is Vibrio chlorea. And then there's also Shigella, which also, again, diarrhea, but it also can deal with fever, and people also can get stomach pains. There's Salmonella, which causes gastritis, and then there's Hesperiera, and people get fever, head and muscle aches, as well as kidney and liver damages, and in mycotoxis, and which leads us actually into some effects of which a big one is mycotoxins. And one is the increased exposure, again, because of the mass destruction within that area. It's just a big breeding pool for mold growth, which then it makes it harder for people to get into, which is a compressed infrastructures. And with those compressed infrastructures, there's limited space, limited amount of resources. So people, I'm just trying to make sure my trains of thoughts are lining up. Here we go. It limits the access to medical care. So people can't get the proper diagnoses. People can't get in for treatments because they have hierarchies. Not to say that one, whether if it's a physical bodily injury versus a pathogen or some other disease, it's all on a case-by-case scenario. So with limited amount of beds within the hospitals and some hospitals might have been affected themselves, whereas also workers could have been affected. People can't get into work. It makes it hard for those people to be able to come in and do their jobs and to provide the best healthcare on such a limited amount of resources. Which then also leads us into the third, which is a weakened immune system. People not being able to get in, whether it's because they personally cannot physically get themselves to the hospital or a physician of any sorts, or if the physician's not there, people can't get the proper diagnoses and treatments, which then again limits and harms their own health risk, and it's causing them to stay fatigued and they can't properly heal. And then we're going into the disasters of mycology, and that is a study of how human or man-made as well as natural disasters, impact the fungal population, and the new changes affect, and how those changes affect human, plant, as well as animal health. And some of the importance of identifying the accessing as well as monitoring, those can affect the importance of those affect the importance of identifying accessory of monitoring which prevents health issues. It protects the vulnerable population. Sorry, I think I misread my own notes. Sorry, I did misread my notes. This last part goes into my second form. I was like, that doesn't sound right. Alrighty. So the last question of part A was stating, what is a disaster of mycology and why is it important to identify, access, and monitor the fungal contamination? And that's because it prevents health issues. It protects the vulnerable populations, so those that have weaker immune systems or autoimmune not born pathogens, but people that have immune deficiencies, as well as informing and being able to prepare the public with responses and recovery efforts, as well as it improves the preparedness and the response. And now for part B, which it says we're just researching. So there's big ethical challenges within microbiological research in disaster areas, because you have to make sure that you're being vulnerable to the community, but also making sure that you're informing them of their safety risk, whatever dual roles. So like the researchers have to make sure that they're providing the proper healthcare, but also they face conflicts in balancing research goals, as well as with what the people need. And then there needs to be make sure there's justice and resource allocation. So there needs to make sure there's efforts and divert resources. If there's immediate reliefs and just benefits from research should also just fairly be distributed within the affected communities, as well as like the public perception and trust. So after the public hears all this, it still has to make sure that, does the public want to hear this? Do we feel safe? And what is being told to us? Which are just kind of some key dilemmas that happen. But the ethical considerations and prioritizations is that, again, we're still main concern is safety. And we have to make sure that everyone needs to know what's the best and the safest route and things to do. But making sure that the information is meaningful. It's not just some whole bunch of random baloney. And making sure that the community is well informed and aware of what's going on. They need to be engaged. They need to be well indulged in what is happening within their community, especially during natural disasters. And just being able to share those, it does benefit the community, because they're helping save people from malnutrition or, not having proper water or things like that. So it's allowing them to have time to relocate if they need to, or just they can make their own educated decision of what to do or what their next steps will be. So just in conclusion from that, it is great in advancing for the scientific knowledge, but making sure that people are just well informed, making sure that they're saved by all means necessary first, and then just making sure that the area that it is affected is just prepared, and that they're either evacuated or there are rescues or things in set in place to help those people within those areas that weren't able to leave. So there needs to make sure that, you know, that, okay, if you're not able to leave, there's water that will be readily accessible. There will be people either in boats or driving around or whatever there may be of ways to access these people, that there will be foods and things, so that way they at least know that, hey, you're not just going to be stranded. And there's where you have it. I can't wait for week 7. I can't believe that it's already here. And until next time.